Why you lying? Do all your know what's going on with you? Do you tell you burning, or do you lie to him like you did me? Or is you lying to them how you did me?
Everybody getting burnt. I don't give a.
Or is you lying? Or did you lie to me? Did you lie? Did you tell them the truth?
Sound dumb.
Or did you tell them the truth? When you gonna keep it gangster? Hey.
The truth about what, sir?
And when you gonna keep it gangster?
Who are you to lie?
When you gonna keep it gangster? That's what you did. You lied to me for 6 months, and then you told me you had that shit.
Stop scrolling, because last night's IG Live didn't just go viral. It triggered full-blown internet panic. And now everyone is scrambling to figure out what was actually said versus what the internet decided it meant. One live stream, a few vague statements, some emotional moments taken out of context. And suddenly, names like Keef, Boosie, and Drake were being dragged into a storm they never commented on, all while timelines spiraled out of control. What started as a raw, unfiltered moment instantly mutated into something darker. Clips were chopped, words were rearranged, fake captions spread faster than the original video. Group chats lit up with "Did you hear?" and "Is this real?" before anyone stopped to verify anything. Within minutes, speculation had hardened into headlines, and panic replaced patience. Fans swear they heard a confirmation. Critics say the internet filled in dangerous blanks. Commentary pages ran with half-truths. Reaction channels went live without context. And suddenly, a moment that should have been handled with care became a cautionary tale about how fast misinformation can ignite when shock outweighs responsibility. The most chilling part, no one could agree on what actually happened, only that the fallout was already massive. Silence from the people being named only fueled the chaos. Every second without clarification made the rumors feel louder, heavier, and harder to stop. This isn't just another celebrity moment gone left. This is what happens when livestream culture, clout-chasing edits, and unchecked speculation collide in real time. And once you see how quickly this spun out of control, you'll understand why people are saying the damage may already be done, even if the truth never supported the panic in the first place. The moment the live stream ended, the damage was already in motion. Not because of what was actually said, but because of what people thought they heard. And in the age of clipped audio and viral captions, perception doesn't wait for clarification. Sexyy Red's IG Live was raw, emotional, messy in the way unfiltered moments usually are. But within minutes, it was no longer her live stream. It belonged to the internet, and the internet had decided to rewrite it. It started with a single clip, 15 seconds, out of context, a pause that people filled in themselves. Someone added a caption that wasn't spoken. Someone else reposted it with a more alarming headline. And suddenly, what had been a chaotic but personal moment turned into something far more dangerous. A rumor dressed up as confirmation. Group chats ignited. Screenshots flew. "Did you see this?" turned into "She admitted it." No one stopped to ask admitted what. The comments did the work instead. Words like confirmed and exposed were thrown around so confidently that hesitation felt pointless. The clip spread faster than the full video ever could, because the full video required attention, and the clip required belief. Within an hour, names that had never appeared on the livestream itself were being dragged into the narrative. Keef, Boosie, Drake, not because of evidence, not because of statements, but because association is enough when panic takes over. Fans began connecting imaginary dots, pulling up old collaborations, old photos, old lyrics, as if proximity equaled involvement. And the more those names circulated, the more real the rumor felt. What made this especially volatile was how quickly commentary pages jumped in. Some framed it as breaking news. Others used careful language in tiny font while their headlines screamed catastrophe. Reaction channels went live without context, replaying the same clipped moment on a loop while speculating in real time. Every "I don't know for sure, but" added fuel. Disclaimers became decoration, not protection. Sexyy Red hadn't said anything new. She hadn't clarified. She hadn't confirmed the narrative the internet was building. But silence doesn't slow rumors, it accelerates them. Fans interpreted her lack of response as shock. Critics interpreted it as avoidance. Everyone interpreted it as something, because the internet doesn't tolerate ambiguity. People who watched the entire livestream tried to push back. They pointed out missing context. They explained that statements were being misheard, misquoted, and outright invented. But those corrections traveled slowly and landed softly. Panic always outruns explanation. A calm breakdown doesn't compete with a dramatic accusation, especially when fear is involved. As the hours passed, the tone shifted from confusion to certainty. Comment sections stopped asking questions and started making claims. It's obvious. You can hear it. Why would she say that if it wasn't true? Those arguments stacked on top of each other, forming a shaky tower of assumption that felt solid simply because so many people were standing on it. The most unsettling part was how quickly empathy disappeared. Instead of concern, there was spectacle. Instead of restraint, there was engagement farming. People joked. People made memes. People treated a serious, sensitive topic like entertainment, forgetting that real lives were being dragged into the conversation without consent. The line between discussion and harm vanished completely. Meanwhile, the people being named stayed silent. No statements, no denials, no clarifications. That silence wasn't an admission, it was a refusal to engage with a narrative they didn't create. But the internet read it differently. Silence became suspicious. Silence became, why aren't they saying anything? And every unanswered question became proof in a trial that didn't exist. Insiders claimed PR teams were scrambling behind the scenes, not to respond to facts, but to respond to misinformation. That's the nightmare scenario, when you're forced to manage a story that isn't true but is spreading faster than truth ever could. Once a rumor hits that velocity, responding can legitimize it, and staying quiet can let it metastasize. There's no clean move. Sexyy Red's name continued trending, detached from reality and attached to panic. People stopped talking about her music, her persona, her career. They talked about implications, about fear, about what this means. And meaning, once assigned by the crowd, is almost impossible to take back. By the end of the night, the original live stream felt irrelevant. Hardly anyone was watching it anymore. They were watching reactions to reactions, interpretations of interpretations. The story had multiplied so many times that no one could trace it back to the source without effort, and effort isn't how virality works. This first phase wasn't about confirmation. It was about acceleration. About how fast a moment can be transformed into a crisis when shock value is rewarded and verification is optional. And as the panic settled into a steady hum across timelines, one thing became clear. Even if the truth surfaced tomorrow, it would be chasing a narrative that already had a head start. Because once fear enters the chat, facts have to fight uphill just to be heard. The second wave didn't explode, it congealed. The initial panic had already done its job, and now the rumor settled into something more dangerous. Assumed knowledge. People weren't sharing the clip anymore. They were sharing takes about the clip. Interpretations hardened into statements, and statements were passed around like facts no one felt responsible for proving. This is where misinformation becomes almost impossible to reverse. By the next morning, timelines were full of confident declarations from people who hadn't watched the full live stream and didn't care to. She basically admitted it. Everyone knows what she meant. Why else would she go live like that? The logic was circular, but it felt airtight because repetition creates authority. When enough people say the same thing, doubt feels naive. Reaction channels doubled down. Some tried to backpedal slightly, adding longer disclaimers while still feeding speculation. Others leaned into ambiguity on purpose, asking leading questions that sounded cautious but steered viewers toward the same conclusion. "I'm not saying it's true," they'd say, before spending 20 minutes explaining why it might be. The algorithm rewarded the fear, not the restraint. Meanwhile, those trying to correct the narrative ran into a wall. Screenshots of the full livestream were posted, pointing out missing context, pauses being misinterpreted, words being added by captions that never came out of her mouth. But these clarifications were long, nuanced, and unexciting. They didn't fit neatly into a thumbnail. They didn't make people feel shocked. So they sank. What made this phase especially grim was how quickly the rumor began shaping behavior. Fans started arguing aggressively under unrelated posts. Comment sections became hostile. People accused anyone pushing back of covering up or protecting celebrities. Skepticism was reframed as complicity. Asking for proof was treated like denial. That's when the narrative crossed into something darker, moral certainty without evidence. Sexyy Red still hadn't spoken, and the longer she stayed quiet, the more people assigned meaning to it. Some said she was overwhelmed. Others claimed she was being silenced. A few insisted her silence was confirmation enough. None of these interpretations were grounded in reality, but they didn't need to be. They felt plausible, and plausibility is enough to keep a rumor alive. The names being dragged into the conversation were now treated as part of a shared story, even though none of them had been connected to the livestream in any direct way. Old lyrics were dissected, past interviews were reinterpreted, Jokes were treated as foreshadowing. Everything became retroactive evidence. Once a narrative takes hold, the past gets rewritten to support it. At the same time, a quieter backlash was forming. People began pointing out how reckless this had become, how casually serious topics were being thrown around for engagement, how easily fear and stigma were being weaponized without regard for harm. These voices didn't dominate the conversation, but they added friction, enough to make some viewers pause. The pause didn't stop the machine, but it cracked the illusion of consensus. Some creators deleted or edited videos. Others pinned comments acknowledging that things were getting out of hand. A few openly admitted they'd jumped too fast and were walking things back. These moments of accountability mattered, but they came late. The rumor had already reached saturation. By now, the story wasn't spreading because of Sexyy red at all. It was spreading because of anxiety. People were afraid of missing something important, afraid of being the last to know, afraid of looking foolish later if the rumor turned out to be true. Fear of being wrong pushed people to repeat claims they hadn't verified. And then came the fatigue. Timelines began to thin out, fewer new posts, more recycled arguments. The same clips, the same takes, the same questions, asked with less urgency but more confidence. That's when a rumor becomes background noise, no longer shocking, just accepted. The most troubling part of this second wave was how normal it all started to feel. Speculating about serious matters, dragging names without evidence, treating silence as guilt. People didn't feel like they were doing anything extreme anymore. It was just the conversation. Behind the scenes, the situation was reportedly becoming a nightmare to manage. Not because there was something to hide, but because correcting misinformation requires amplifying it, and amplification can make things worse. Any statement risked being clipped, misquoted, or twisted into proof of something that never happened. Silence was safer, but silence had its own cost. This is the trap of viral panic. Once it reaches this stage, there are no clean exits. Every option feeds the story in a different way. By the end of the second phase, the damage was no longer hypothetical. It wasn't about trending topics or views. It was about how easily a moment had been transformed into a narrative with real emotional weight, all without confirmation, context, or care. The question now wasn't whether the rumor was true. This is how misinformation survives. No one was asking, did this actually happen? Anymore. They were saying things like, after all that drama, or ever since that IG live. The language shifted subtly, but the implication stayed heavy. The rumor no longer needed to be repeated verbatim. It had become shorthand, and shorthand is almost impossible to correct because it doesn't announce itself as false. It just exists. Sexyy red's silence continued, but now it was interpreted less emotionally and more cynically. Early on, people speculated about shock or overwhelm. Now, they framed it as strategy. Her team probably told her not to say anything. They're waiting for it to blow over. This is how they always handle stuff. None of these statements were based on facts, but they sounded reasonable enough to pass without challenge. That's the danger of time. It smooths over uncertainty until assumption feels earned. The names that had been dragged into the chaos also lingered in the afterimage of the story. Even though nothing tied them directly to the livestream, their association with the rumor stuck in subtle ways. Comments under unrelated posts referenced it vaguely. Jokes landed differently. Silence was read with suspicion. The narrative had embedded itself just deeply enough to resurface whenever attention drifted back. This is where the real harm becomes visible, not in headlines, but in perception. People began to acknowledge, quietly, that the situation had spiraled beyond reason. But acknowledgement didn't come with repair. There were no mass corrections, no viral debunkings. The internet doesn't move backward. It just moves on, leaving fragments behind for future moments to pick up and reuse. A few creators tried to reframe the story responsibly, explaining how the rumor started, how it mutated, and how little of it was grounded in anything concrete. These videos didn't perform well. They weren't dramatic. They didn't trigger panic. They required attention and humility. And humility doesn't trend. Meanwhile, the original live stream, the actual source, felt almost irrelevant. Anyone who went back to watch it fresh often came away confused about how things escalated so far. Without captions, without commentary, without ominous music, it didn't support the conclusions people had drawn. But by now, that didn't matter. The interpretation had replaced the event. This is the quiet aftermath of viral panic, when the story stops being interrogated and starts being remembered incorrectly. What made this phase especially unsettling was how easily people justified what had happened. That's just the internet. Celebrities know what they sign up for. If it wasn't true, it wouldn't have spread. These rationalizations didn't defend truth, they defended comfort. Accepting that a rumor ran wild without basis would require confronting how many people participated in spreading it. So instead, the story was allowed to remain ambiguous. Ambiguity feels safer than accountability. Sexyy Red eventually resumed posting as normal, but the atmosphere had changed. Comments weren't the same. The energy wasn't the same. Even without direct accusations, the shadow of the rumor lingered, not because it was proven, but because it had been experienced. People felt like they'd lived through something, and lived experiences don't disappear just because facts don't support them. This is the internet's most insidious trick, confusing emotional memory with evidence. Observers began calling this out more explicitly. They pointed to how quickly serious topics were turned into entertainment, how fear was treated as engagement, how responsibility was outsourced to disclaimers while harm continued uninterrupted. These conversations didn't dominate timelines, but they added a layer of discomfort that couldn't be shaken easily. The biggest realization of the third wave was this: no one actually benefited. Not the audience, who never got clarity. Not the creators, who built content on uncertainty. Not the people named, who carried implications without cause. And not the truth, which never stood a chance once panic took the wheel. The story didn't end with vindication or exposure. It ended with exhaustion. People stopped talking about it not because it was resolved, but because there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been repeated. The rumor didn't collapse, it dissolved. And dissolved stories don't disappear. They seep into future conversations, shaping reactions before facts ever arrive. This is how the next rumor gets a head start, because now the audience has a template, a memory of chaos that feels like precedent. The next time a live stream goes viral, the next time a clip is miscaptioned, the next time silence follows speculation, people will remember this moment, not accurately, but emotionally. And emotion is enough to restart the cycle. By the end of this phase, the most important truth had nothing to do with the original rumor at all. It was about how fragile reality becomes once attention detaches from verification, about how easily panic replaces patience, about how quickly people accept narratives that confirm fear instead of demanding clarity. Nothing was confirmed, nothing was proven, and yet something permanent happened anyway. Because in the internet age, damage doesn't require facts. It only requires momentum. Before you click away, take a breath, because what just unfolded is exactly how damage gets done without anyone ever meaning to do harm. This wasn't about confirmation, proof, or truth. It was about momentum, about how fast fear moves when nobody stops to ask basic questions. If this made you pause, feel uneasy, or rethink how quickly rumors take over timelines, don't ignore that. Hit like so this conversation doesn't get buried under louder, more reckless reactions. Drop a comment and say where you think responsibility starts. With the person who goes live, the people who clip and caption, or the audience that keeps sharing without verifying. And subscribe now, because this won't be the last time a moment like this spirals out of control. Engagement matters here. Silence doesn't undo misinformation, it lets it settle in as memory. Thoughtful discussion is the only thing that slows the cycle before it repeats with someone else's name. This isn't about defending celebrities or calling anyone guilty. It's about recognizing how quickly panic replaces patience and how hard it is to clean up a story once it's already gone viral. Stay locked in, stay critical, and don't let shock outweigh responsibility, because the next rumor will come faster, spread wider, and do more damage if nobody learns from this one.